I'm going to take you back where we lived in Milford. We had a brand new church on Hickory Ridge Road. I was on the corner of Hickory Ridge in Commerce, and we had lived in a house that sat like 2 acres behind it. It was a story-and-a-half house, and it was a pretty gray house, and it had our bedroom where we slept was in the front of the house. Our window was in the front, upstairs. And we had a lot going on at that time. Our daughter was getting married. We were preparing for the wedding, and it wasn't, it was just a simple, nice wedding. It was just beautiful. And I did the decorating. We had help with the food. We had it catered. We had all this going on, and Jennifer was just so beautiful, and Joe's family, they were coming in from Minnesota, and they came in a couple days before the wedding, and we had the rehearsal. It was so much fun. You know how much fun wedding rehearsals are. Nobody knows what they're doing, and everybody's giddy and everything. Then we went out to eat. We just had a great time. And then the next day was the wedding. Our beautiful daughter, Jennifer, she's our oldest daughter. We have 4 kids. Greg's the oldest, and Jennifer, Jody, and Leah. And her father was walking her down the aisle as Pastor Clayton sang Butterfly Kisses, and of course we're all crying, our first daughter getting married. And then the beautiful reception afterward, and then it was over. Jennifer and Joe they stayed at a hotel in Waterford because they were coming over to our house with Joe's family to open presents. All the wedding presents were in the middle of our living room. So they were coming over the next morning to open gifts. And we all just went to bed. Bill and I went to bed. Dog Mona, who was meaner than a junkyard dog, and I'm not kidding you, she didn't like anybody but me. She would bite everybody. She even bit me once. And we had a little dog, Cassie, a little Maltese. Mona was a Cocker Spaniel. Cassie was a Maltese. She was a real friendly, little shy little dog. But Bill and I were in bed with the dogs, and Jody and Leah came in, jumped on our bed. We just sat there and we talked and just talked about the wedding, how much fun we had. And then we finally said, you guys got to get to bed, you know. So they went to bed. Their room was next to ours. Then I woke up to what I thought was a real bad dream. First of all, I was laying in bed, and you know, when your eyes are closed and somebody comes in and turns the bedroom light on, you know there's a light on, right? But you just still can't open your eyes. You're way too tired. And then I heard an "oh no," and I thought, and it was Bill saying "oh no," and he never does that. I knew something was wrong, and I opened my eyes. I looked over, and there was a big man standing next to me. He had a dark ski mask on. He just had the 2 holes for the eyes, didn't have a mouth, and he had a white shirt on and a tan vest, and with the gun just aimed right over us. And I was still hoping this was a bad dream. But anyway, as we were laying there, I closed my eyes, and I heard a loud blast went off, and I couldn't hear after that. It was right in my ear, and I knew Bill had been shot, and I closed my eyes waiting for my turn. And it's amazing, you know, you hear about things going in slow motion, and everything seemed like slow motion going on. The gunshot, and the waiting seemed like an eternity. And while I was waiting to be shot next, I thought about my kids. It's amazing. You can think of a lot of stuff in a split second. And I was thinking about Jody and Leah being in the next room, hoping they don't get hurt. And I thought I didn't want them to find us like this in the morning, them to get up and see their parents in a bloodbath, you know, dead. You know, I didn't want them to see us that way. And I was worried about what was going to happen with their lives. No more parents at such a young age. Well, I waited and waited to be shot and wondering if it was going to hurt. I thought, will it be quick? Would it be painful? Will I suffer? And all that was going through my mind. And then as I waited a while, still nothing. And I opened my eyes, and he was gone. And I looked over, and I saw Bill thrashing in the bed, back and forth, and blood was just everywhere on me, on the walls, the floor, the phone, just everywhere. The bed was just covered with blood, and Bill was moaning and thrashing in the bed. And I jumped up and I just stared at him, and then I ran to the next room to make sure the girls were okay. They looked like they were sleeping, and I yelled at them that someone came in here and shot Daddy. Well, they just got up. They heard, I remember one of the kids saying they heard a noise. It wasn't a gunshot, but they heard someone heavily running down the stairs. And they came in the bedroom, and we were all just in a state of shock. And I was trying to hold towels on Bill's chest. I don't know what, I mean, there was just a hole right through him. I didn't know what good that would do. And I was just in shock, total shock. And I couldn't even stay in the room. I ran downstairs. I asked Leah to hold the towels over your Daddy. I couldn't stand there anymore. And I ran downstairs. I remember looking at the clock, and I remember telling Jody, too. She came downstairs, said, we got to do something quick. Our phone lines were cut, too, and we couldn't call out. And, of course, the cell phone was dead because we weren't thinking about cell phones and on a wedding night. And so I asked Jody, I said, honey, you're going to have to go to the church. Just get in your car and drive quick and get up to the church and use the phone. Well, it was a dark, foggy morning. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was as white out as this. It was so foggy. And so Jody got in her car, and she was gone a long, long, long time. And I thought, oh no, something happened to Jody. And Leah took off, ran. I said, honey, there's a light on at that house. Just keep looking at it and run as fast as you can. Don't stop. Just keep going. Well, she did. She made it to the house behind us. And I'm not going to go into all that because Leah wrote a story about the shooting, and that's in there also. But anyway, come to find out, Jody did not go to the church because there was a light on there, and she was afraid to go in. So she drove down the street to a woman's house that she cleaned the house for, and the woman happened to be a police dispatcher, and she called 911. And finally, the ambulance arrived. The police arrived. The ambulance arrived, and they all were there and got Bill in to the ambulance. I don't know how he was still alive. He lost so much blood. He was very pasty white and could hardly talk. And they carried him down the stairs and got him in the ambulance. And I rode with Jody's friends came over. Her friends' parents came over, and they drove me to the hospital. It was in Huron Valley in Milford. And while we're all waiting there in the surgical waiting room, I remember hearing them asking Bill questions, and he was still alert. You know, and I know one of the reasons he stayed alert because Leah kept screaming at him. She in the bedroom, she says, Daddy, you can't die. I'm only 16. You can't die. You got to live. I need you. And I think that kept him going. She just kept screaming, you can't die. I need you. And so he's answering questions. They have to wear dentures, you know, and stuff like, who cares, you know? Do something. So I'm in the waiting room at the hospital, and people from our church were just pouring in. By then, I don't know, the whole world knew. And the people were praying everywhere. We packed, I don't know, it seemed like 100 people in that little waiting room and in the hallway. And this one lady came up to see me, trying to comfort me, and she was a pastor's wife. But I remember her coming in, and I hadn't really thought about God being anywhere at the time. I could feel I was floating on like a carpet of people praying for me. I was just floating on prayer, getting through, and knowing it was God getting me through. But when she talked to me, this woman, she said, Joanne, where was God? And I just took me back that she asked that. And I said, well, he was there. He's always been there. And it surprised myself because it made me aware of God. You know, we didn't stop loving the Lord because something awful happened. We weren't blaming God because something awful happened. But God was there. And when we went through that awful time, and it made me think, it could have been worse. He could have killed me, the kids, with a bullet, went through the house, went through the wall, just missed the electrical outlets, and someone said if it would have hit it, our house could have caught on fire. I mean, there's a lot of things. Bill could have died. You have to count your blessings. It made me count my blessings and the good out of it. We have to look for the good out of everything and knowing God's in everything. That's what I learned. Anyway, he came out of surgery. It was in intensive care. None of us have slept. We were just so tired. And I stayed with him the whole time he was in intensive care. I slept on the floor, I think they brought me a mat. I slept on something, but I couldn't leave him. I couldn't even sleep because every time I opened my eyes or tried to sleep, I'd open my eyes thinking I saw that person aiming a gun at me. But anyway, after all that, I had awful nightmares every night. No one could sleep in our bed for a while. We had our places to sleep. Bill slept in the recliner, and I slept in the recliner for a while. We were all over the house. We even had someone come and stay with us for a few nights with a shotgun until Bill got better. But I slept with a fire extinguisher, and Jody slept with a golf club. And then we finally bought a gun, which we always felt nervous about it. Thought I was always being followed. And no matter where I went, I'd get in the car, someone was following me. I was always looking in my rearview mirror, and I wanted to know where all the police stations were so I could drive into one, where I could feel safe. So that went on for a while. But one of the worst things was that the police, they had to talk to everyone. And a lot of times things like that, it's from within a family. You're wondering, did the wife do it? Was she trying to kill her husband? We just got a new life insurance too. On top of that, we had a good policy. I thought, yes, if something does happen, I'm all set. But well, that was, I went through the lie detector test, and I remember the guy asking me at the state police station, have you ever had an affair on your husband? And I said, no. He didn't believe me. And I'm going, no. I said, just because you did. I never. I could tell. I don't know how I knew, but this guy acted like it's the normal thing to do. People have affairs on each other. So that shut him up for a while. I was ready to choke the man by then. I had it by then. But so I went through all that. And of course, I passed the lie detector test. I wasn't lying. And but one of the things I really had to get through was my fear. I was so scared. I always like to go to Target. That's still my favorite store. And I'd go the back roads to Target, down these side roads. They were paved, but this one stop sign, I just dreaded stopping at it. I just hated that, and I was hoping it was a 4-way stop. And I had to sit there. But every time I went there, I knew someone was following me, and I thought they're going to wait till I stop at the stop sign, and they're going to come up and drive around and shoot me. I knew that was always going to happen. Everywhere I went, day after day, I knew this was how I was going to die. Well, one day I was at that stop sign, and I said, Lord, this isn't right. I don't want to live my life in fear. And the Lord spoke to me, and he said, I'm not giving you a spirit of fear, but of love and a sound mind. And he told me, Joanne, nobody can hurt you anyway unless I allow it. Even if someone was right next to you and shot you or was shooting you, I could stop that bullet too. And from then on, I don't know, it's kind of weird to explain, but I felt like I was in those globes with the snow in them that you shake. I felt like I was in one of those, only in light. God wrapped me in his light. And I like that song about that. How does that go? He wraps himself in light and darkness tries to hide. And it trembles. Darkness trembles at his voice. That's how I felt, and my fear was all gone. I thought, I'm surrounded in light, and a bullet would, even if it happened, it would bounce off of that light. It can't hurt me. And from then on, I've, felt safe. And, just to let you know, the person is still out there, and sometimes I feel like he's still following me, because I'm sure he knows where we live. And but I keep thinking, I go back to that time when the Lord healed me of that fear, and I thought, I'm still claiming that fear, so I'm not afraid. So thank you. Can I turn this off?
Again, I want to thank you for being here today, and thank you, honey, for sharing. Joanne and I have been married now nearly 34 years, and as she already mentioned, we have 4 kids, 3 girls and a boy, and 8 grandchildren, 7 girls and 1 boy. Yeah, 7 boys and 1 girl, or 7 girls and 1 boy. Whew, wow. I want to set the stage similar to what she shared some things, but I'm going to talk about the whole year from my perspective very briefly, and then I'll be reading what Leah wrote at 16 years old. The year was incredible. It was 1996, and it was incredibly eventful. In January of that year, we went to a conference on the ministry, and I've shared it in church several times. My lungs had been burnt as a welder 17 years before that, and they had a prayer time, and I went forward, and the pastor prayed for me, and my lungs were totally healed after being only having about 40% of my breathing left. They were totally healed at that point, and I'll get to the reason why that was so important. Because just before that, at Christmas time of 1995, I had told Joanne, I said, I don't know how long I can go on with my lungs the way they were. I was coughing up blood every day. It was terrible. So then in January of 1996, God totally healed my lungs. In March of 96, the church that I pastored for 10 years, we moved into our new building. That was an exciting time. Then we had our formal dedication in May. Jody graduated from high school, and we had our open house in June. We had another open house in June. My nephew, our nephew, had graduated from high school, and we had his open house as well. So we had 2 open houses. Moved into a new building, formal dedication. It was just a crazy year. Then finally, it was October of 96, and after more than 10 months of prayer and planning and preparation, Jen was getting married. And I remember even saying to Joanne, I can't wait till things get back to normal. How many have been there before? I can't wait till things get back to normal. How many are there right now? I can't wait till things get back to normal. And only to experience just in a couple days, someone would try to murder me. I want you to say, murder me. Murder me. It's a tough thing to say. Say it again, because when the realization hit me that someone tried to kill me, I try to get along with everybody, I think I'm a pretty nice guy most of the time. The only people I'm mean to is my family, most of the time. And how many agree with that, in your own life? And so anyway, to the realization that someone had tried to murder me was just unbelievable. I couldn't get my hands around it, couldn't comprehend it. The wedding was awesome, as Joanne already mentioned. Picture perfect. Our daughter had met Joe at Bible college. It was supposed to be the perfect marriage, a perfect wedding. It was just incredible. Everything went awesome. After we'd gotten home that night, as Joanne already mentioned, we had a great time just hanging out and enjoyed it. And then all of a sudden, things changed drastically. Say drastically. Anybody ever have things change drastically on you? One day you got a job, and the next day, no job. Things changed drastically. A masked man came into our bedroom. He had cut the phone lines. And he made his way through the house, turned on all the lights, say all. All the lights in the house, unlocked all the doors. So he had made several ways of escape. He had turned on all the lights so he wouldn't stumble through the house. And at 5:10, he came into our bedroom, turned on the light, and as the light went on, I woke up. I had been holding Joanne, as she mentioned. She was laying next to me. I had my arms wrapped around her, and I was holding her in my arms, and he flipped the light on, and I reached up and I went, oh no. And he pulled the trigger on a 12-gauge shotgun and put a hole through my chest. And the slugs, this slug right here, Scott, maybe you could tell us, what did you shoot?
Well, this is 7 pieces of 3/4 plywood. There's actually 2 holes in there. I had to shoot it twice because the first time it went far, far through to it. In fact, I put in front of it another 5 inches of very hard maple, try to stop the bullet. And so it went through, 11 inches of wood and finally stopped. I think it would have kept on going, but I put a big, very hard log behind it. So,
And it's an ounce of lead, and that's what went through me. It's interesting that I raised my arm because it went through my chest right here, blew a 3-inch hole right here through my chest. And if you all cheer enough, I'll take my shirt off later. But anyway, as I raised my arm, it went through the meaty part underneath my arm. If I hadn't raised my arm, it would have hit my shoulder blade and blown my back off. So, I believe an angel went. I'm like, yeah, okay. Because I went, oh no, like that. And there went the bullet. So, anyway, and here's, it's empty, but there's an ounce of lead. Everybody hold out their finger. Just below the knuckle on most fingers. Some of you ladies, it might be your whole finger. But it's an ounce of lead. That's about an ounce of lead. There it is. Squished. That's an ounce of lead squished. Okay? So that's what went through me. Let me share Leah's story. Again, she was just had actually turned 17, I think. Actually at that time, or right around 17. It was about 1 a.m. and my parents were chatting to each other on their bed when I came in to say goodnight. They couldn't have been happier with such an evening as their eyes sparkled and their expressions glowed with contentment. I climbed into my bed and closed my eyes. My body was exhausted and my mind was worn out as I fell asleep. Just after 5 a.m., my ears were filled with unusual sounds. My eyes shot open and I was very angry at whatever was waking me up, as my sister Jody and I, half asleep in our beds, muttered back and forth, trying to figure out what was going on. I flipped over and tried to go back to sleep. Just wouldn't happen. It was as though I had wakened to a dream, and in it was my mother and my sister wandering about the house, their voices faint and distorted, mumbling in panic, and each trying to understand the other's nonsense. As I crawled out of bed, curiosity and confusion guided me to this very chaotic scene, where I saw in my sleep, in a terrible nightmare. I couldn't seem to shake it. I couldn't wake and open my eyes, with relief to find the peaceful comfort of reality. My body began to shake so hard I could barely stand. My mother, wide-eyed with fright, tried to explain in a high-pitched, panicky voice, "Someone came in here and shot Daddy." I sat on the stairs, feeling helplessly in shock, trying to drown out the terrifying sounds of losing myself in a helpless, distant gaze. My mom stopped and tried to calmly ask my dad, "Honey, do you know who did this to you?" My father, struggling for breath, muttering through his cries, "I don't know. I don't know." "Call 911, call 911, my mom kept insisting, and each of us kept picking up a dead phone. Several times in panic and disbelief. "Get the church keys," my sister and I ordered my mother to do, as she climbed up and down the stairs, handing my sister the keys to the car. She continued to do this repetitively as we begged for her concentration. Finally, my Sister Jody grabbed the keys and left for help, not knowing whether the gunman was waiting outside for her. Then my mother ordered me upstairs to be with my wounded father, groaning and dying before my helpless, frightened eyes. I hurried back down the stairs to avoid that terrifying sight. Then she handed me a towel and ordered me right back up again. I stared out the window, my eyes anticipating lights and sirens racing down the long and winding driveway, reassuring all of us of hope. I was yelling, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus," as fast as my tongue could possibly speak. He would cry out in a long, low, and miserable tone, "Oh God, I'm dying, I'm dying." His voice repetitively moaned, each time more faint than the last. Each sound would slowly drown in deep anxiety and misery. I tried to hold the towel indecisively over each of the holes punctured in his now blood-drenched body. And as he began to say goodbye, I screamed, I need you, Daddy. I need you. I need you, Daddy. Don't go. I need you. My voice shaky yet strong and demanding. I need you now more than ever before. You can't leave me now. As thoughts of my life without him flashed quickly through my terrified mind. He began to roll, and more blood and fluid began to pour out. Stop it, please, stop it, I pleaded. I can't help it, he moaned. He moaned in agony. I can't help it. I screamed, God is here, Daddy! God is here! He's here with you right now! Though I found it hard to believe myself as I watched his humble and honest life being slowly taken away from him. For in that moment, I could see the demented thoughts and irrational intentions of the killer. As the smell of gunfire and blood filled the tormented room, my father began to repeat what would seem to be his dying words with me, with the very little breath he had left. Serve Jesus, I love you, serve Jesus. I could hear him drowning in his own blood. His moans slowly began to turn into soft and unusual groans and murmurs, the sound of death setting in. Nothing like anything I could ever recall, nor anything I would ever forget. Yet I answered him, I know, Daddy, I know. I want to serve Jesus, I know. Soon my mother raced upstairs. Because so much time had passed since Jody had left, she ordered me to run to the neighbors. So there I was in my pajamas, cold and wet as my feet shifted rapidly in the soft and sticky dirt. I was bawling my eyes out and fearful as the yard was laid out like a minefield before my eyes. I looked out into the long wet grass as it was clothed in fog, and I ran so fast I felt nothing but adrenaline racing through my body. I reached a long line of houses, all dark and completely unaware of about the chaotic tragedy taking place right behind their homes. My eyes caught a light shining through my neighbor's window. When I found the door, I banged and I pounded, gasping for air. As he opened the door, I began to sob. Someone shot my dad! Someone shot my dad! I was feeling more like a character in a play as these words poured from my mouth. As the man watched me so dramatically lose myself in an emotional fright and tears, he stood there confused and with disbelief as he picked up the phone, and I ordered him, call 911, call 911. I raced through his cupboards, turned on the faucet, and grabbed a glass without the stranger's permission. My mouth was so dry I could barely speak. He drove me back to my house where the police had finally arrived. My sister Jody had returned, but now more frightened than ever before. I tried holding her and keep giving her strength at the same time. They carried my father down on a stretcher, and my sister Jody shrieked, I love you, Daddy, as she jumped up and down uncontrollably. My dad removed his oxygen mask and responded with a whisper, I love you too. He lifted up his thumb, trying to reassure all of us that everything would be okay. The trees that lined our drive were bare and swayed in the cold and eerie wind. I stared out the window of the police car where we were parked in the lot of the church, facing our once peaceful home. There I sat, impatiently, with a policewoman I had never met before. The thought of my father's death seemed very close and real. I began to mumble on about my dad's awesome crown in heaven, my mind searching for consolation as my stomach began to ache and churn with anxiety and despair. A sudden tragedy that happened so fast, I felt I had witnessed it in my sleep. I pictured the arms of God open wide, embracing my father, saving him from this wicked world he tried so much to love and care for. As he continued to mumble, my mind trying to collect and accept the truth to what I was saying and the reality of what had just happened and what could happen. The policewoman in the car insisted I stop and think positively and hope my father would stay alive. But I didn't know that, and neither did she. God had a plan, and I had to trust that either way, everything would be okay. I began to sob and sometimes scream, and half the things I tried to say were strange, and I was completely unable to follow through. I felt emotionally destroyed, and my mind completely twisted on how to react. I had awakened to a dream that quickly revealed itself to be a nightmare. The frightening sight, the unbearable smell, and the terrifying sounds would haunt my memory forever. The results that would unfold, whatever they might be, would be with me the rest of my life. Daylight finally coated the sky in a dull and dreary shade of gray. With my sister, Jody, by my side, we clutched hands and stepped into what seemed to be a movie as we entered the hospital. My eyes caught a clutter of emotion that quickly groped around us and squeezed us hard. We continued down what seemed to be a tunnel of cries and murmurs, "I love you! I love you!" as arms draped around us from every direction. My intent was to be strong as my sister began to sob harder and harder. My face flushed and my eyes swollen from the hours of crying. The hospital was reassuring, though the chances of death were real as he remained in critical condition. I sat down in the surgical waiting room and glanced at my oldest sister wearing sloppy clothes and white heels from her wedding the night before. I felt all the eyes upon me, mostly very concerned, yet I felt obligated to react somehow. I expressed mostly anger and despised the awkward notion of comfort when I felt they had no idea what I had witnessed, what I had been through. Later, I left the hospital with my boyfriend to change my clothes and maybe get something to eat. When I returned to the hospital, I met my dad's friend outside, and he told me my father was out of surgery and that I could see him. Then he looked at me very close, and he put his arm around me, and he tried to warn me. He tried to warn me about the machines and the tubes and not to be alarmed. As I raced into the hospital, into his room, expecting him to be lying there peacefully and looking at me, instead I charged in, and my heart stopped. Mom, what's wrong with him?" I asked. She was calm, and she tried to explain the medication as I watched his swollen body shake vigorously in the bed. It appeared like any second it would just stop and he would be gone. The tears began to fill my eyes as I tried to speak. "I love you, Daddy. I love you." He nodded through his twitching and his shaking, and I knew he could hear me and wanted to say the same. The days thereafter were in the time zone of their own. I felt like I was living in a world completely torn and isolated from, so it seems, the civilized world. I was trapped in an endless series of thoughts, questions that only seemed to tear at my heart. The hours I spent at the hospital were few. I couldn't handle being there. My family stayed day and night in the waiting room with little sleep, and they were frightened and emotionally and physically exhausted. My father laid there in bed with tubes in and out of his throat, his eyes opening and closing as every so often the machines beeped and flashed around him. My sisters and I would sing to him. Between mutters of cries and sniffles, only shaky voices blended like little children as we repetitively sang, "He's got the whole world in his hands," and he would squeeze our hands as tears filled the corner of his eyes. At that moment, I was reminded of the late hours. The late hours that my father would be at our bedside praying with us when we were sick. He would clutch our hands and sing hallelujah over and over and over again. As I stood in the ICU room amongst the beeping of the machines and oxygen tubes, I came to realize the purpose of unity inside the family. It's not only about comfort and love, but also about perseverance and support. I didn't completely appreciate the impact my father had had on my life until the arms of death were so close to snatching him away. Never did I understand the real power of God or presence of God until I saw the grace laid so desperately upon my father's life. Though my emotions asked many questions, my gratefulness to God is immeasurable. You see, my father was shot with a 12-gauge shotgun, leaving a 3-inch hole on the right side of his chest. The 1 ounce of lead came through 1 inch above his liver and 2 inches from his heart. He lost 7 pints of blood but never lost consciousness. the chances of infection were very high, and most likely due to the surgery performed on his colon. But there was no infection, and the healing process was a miracle. 17 years before my dad was shot, my father suffered a chemical burn to his lungs. For those 17 years, he only had 40% of his breathing capacity, but 10 months before the shooting, his lungs were restored to over 100%. During the trauma, the bullet hit his right lung, and his lung and diaphragm collapsed, meaning if his lungs had not been healed, he would have never survived. It leaves your mind in awe of a higher power that as a human being we can't seem to grasp or scientifically understand, but the results are unexplainable, and it seems to the open eyes to a very real God who is completely in control, to a God who is always there. Today, a couple things I want to add to this is after the shooting, as I laid there in bed, I was too full of fear, as Joanne described. And I remember laying there, and once the tubes had gotten out, and I was only in the hospital 10 days, which was amazing. They said if I did live, it'd be 6 to 8 weeks, and they'd have to have multiple surgeries. But 10 days I was out of the hospital. In 8 weeks, I was totally healed. The holes were gone. And Joanne became my caring nurse because the nurses they sent to us all stood over me and went, "Ah! I can't believe it!" as they looked through the hole inside of me. So we just thought, you know what, we'll handle this. And her and I would pray, and we would literally see the hole close up. She would have to clean the wound twice a day, and it would close up throughout the day. It was amazing. But the one thing that I remember, to going back to that lying in bed, I remember lying there and thinking, I can't go on. I just can't go on. I went into the bathroom and I stood and I looked at myself in the mirror, and he asked me how I got gray hair. That day, after going through this frightful thing, my hair was totally gray. Totally gray. And I said, I can't go on, God. And I stood before the mirror and I'm bawling my eyes out. I said, something has to happen because I'm so afraid. I can't be a pastor. I love people too much. I can't be secluded from them. God, I need a miracle. And he told me to get back in bed. And as I laid in bed, he reminded me of Jesus on the cross, how Jesus on the cross looked out at those who had crucified him, and he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And the Lord impressed upon me, I had to forgive. And the moment I forgave that man that shot me was the moment that peace came in, and I knew that God had a future for my life. So forgiveness is a key. If you're here today, you're going through a difficult time, you must operate in forgiveness. Second of all, I remember the nurse saying to me, boy, you're such a strong man. And tears came to my eyes. She said, I heard the story. No one lives through a 12-gauge shotgun blast anywhere to the body, but particularly the chest. How'd you do it? You must be so strong. And I said, no. I was bawling my eyes out. I said, no, I'm not strong, but God is. God brought me through it. And my wife, an incredible woman of God, we had come back to the house and we were there at the driveway. And you know, most wives would say, hey, let's get out of here, let's move to another state. We were getting letters about, you ought to move away, change your name. That's the only safe thing to do. We were driving down the driveway, or at the end of the driveway, and I said, honey, she was driving, and I said, honey, do you want to move away? And she said, no, God gave us this house. We're going back to it. We're not leaving our home, we're not leaving our church. And we went back, and God did a lot of great things in the ministry after that. As I mentioned, 7 pints of blood and never lost consciousness. The operating room experience, yes, they were talking to me, and I'll never forget, they said to me, they were asking me all those questions about dentures and everything else and how this happened. And then I heard them talking. I heard them say, wow, was this a suicide, attempted suicide? And someone else said, no, you know what, there was a wedding. Maybe he went into the wrong bedroom. And I thought at that moment, I said, you know what? I'm coming out of this and I'm going to tell you what really happened. So it gave me something to fight about. Also, all the way to the hospital in the ambulance, the guy kept screaming at me. Leah screamed at me to keep me alive in the house. And then the ambulance guy kept screaming at me, don't go, stay with me, Bill, stay with me, you're going to make it. Well, when I heard this discussion, I all of a sudden, I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was leaving my body and I was dying. I felt a perfect peace. Say perfect peace. And I didn't know what was going on. The next thing I woke up, about a day later or whatever, and I was pretty rough shape. But I thought I had died. Come to find out, go to the doctor for a follow-up visit. And as we go into the doctor, the nurse met us at the door and she said, I got to tell you what happened. She said, there were hundreds of people, that was her description, I don't know how many were there, but they were praying for you and they had asked me to go get more blood and I came back in with the blood, and as I came back in, everybody was screaming, we're losing him, we're losing him. And the head doctor said, do you feel that peace? He's going to live, he's going to make it. This is a man of God, and he's going to make it. And, God obviously brought me through, and it was a miracle. Just 2 months after the shooting, I got to share in front of about 1,000 people at the ministers' conference. And that year they had the revival team from Pensacola. And I remember standing up there, and everybody was concerned and asking that question, where was God? And Joanne and I have chose, not only through this situation, but other situations in our lives, to be victors and not victims. Winners and not losers. That's why we challenge you and we encourage you to do the same, because God can get you through anything. But someone asked me that question, why did He allow you to be shot? And so I got that question in my mind too. God, if you were there, why did I get shot? And he showed me an angel that carried that 1 ounce of lead through my body. And then I said, well, God, why didn't you just carry it around my body? Why through my body? And he made it very clear that, you can tell somebody you've been shot in the chest, but to show them the scar proves that there's a God. Proves that there's a God. And so I know that a lot of you have scars today. And in Matthew chapter 4, we're not going to turn there, but in Matthew chapter 4, verses 23 through 25, it says that Jesus went about healing all kinds of diseases. And the term, and it's not consistent throughout the New Testament, but in that specific place, it's called malakia. And the term for diseases. And it doesn't mean like cancer and diabetes, those type of diseases, although that could be included. But it means things that set you back. That's the definition. Things that set you back. Today, there are things that are setting some of you back. And you're asking, God, where are you? Where are you? Maybe you've lost a loved one and things haven't been the same since. But I want to tell you that God's got a plan and He's got a destiny, He's got a purpose for your life. But you must choose to trust Him.